Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Guys Who Stared Stats. Cade Kennedy with you alongside Tyler Riggs. It is a Tuesday night, so it is time to take a look at the college football playoff rankings for week 14 of the college football season. Before we fully get into it, Tyler, I know you already said you've got your opinions rattling around in your mind. Feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, what you agree with, whether it be us or the committee, what you disagree with, all that fun stuff. It only takes a minute or two out of your day. We do sincerely appreciate it, though. But Tyler, you take a look at this thing. To start it off, the top four, no change there. That's not surprising. Notre Dame filing into that 5 hole because of their just absolutely giant win they had over Army. And then where things get interesting, at least to me, Miami is number 6, ahead of Georgia, ahead of Tennessee, and ahead of SMU. And the other 3 10-1 teams down there, SMU, Indiana, and Boise State in that order. Clemson rounds out the 12 spot there. Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina all on the outside looking in there with Clemson, because Arizona State at 16 would be the last of the 5 conference champions to get in. They would jump Clemson and take that 12 spot.
Yeah, what an interesting ranking. I think the big question in everybody's mind was kind of, hey, what's going to happen to your 3-loss SEC teams, namely Alabama and Ole Miss? So I think the committee's got them in some interesting spots here.
Yeah, I think so. The main concern I've seen tonight on social media, at least from certain people, and this has been building all Sunday into Monday, was they're going to try to get Alabama in. They're going to do whatever they can, they being the committee, are going to do everything they can to get Alabama in. And do I think they should be number 13 in the country? No, I don't. You have 3 losses. Only one of them is a quality loss, quote unquote. A bad loss at Vandy. Giving up 40 to Vandy is just horrible. And then getting blown out by Oklahoma. The problem is, though, any other year you could justifiably kick Alabama out of the top 15 and, maybe put them at 17, 18. The problem, though, this year, as you know, Tyler, what I'm about to say, who do you replace them with? They beat South Carolina. Yeah. That's a big win they have there in their hat. I think, Ole Miss should be in front of them, maybe, because Ole Miss, I would say that, and Ole Miss has that bad loss to Kentucky and other moments there you can look at. Florida, obviously, this week as well. But I think, maybe if you want to switch Ole Miss and Alabama, but they both beat South Carolina, so they both have to be there. I get the anger. I get it. I completely understand where people are. Alabama has 2 horrible losses. They also got beat by Tennessee. Yes, they have the Georgia win, but they tried to blow that. They had, you can look at all that, and I get where people are coming from with that. But it's just, you look at everyone below them, and it's, who are you going to put over them? Because, the only team I think that I've seen the biggest gripe out of tonight is Arizona State fans saying, hey, we're 9-2. One of our losses, we didn't even have our starting quarterback. Jeff Sims had to come in. That was the loss to Cincinnati. We've had all this momentum behind us. We've had everything. Why are we not ahead of those 3 SEC teams, or at least ahead of one of them, I think, is where their main concern comes from. And again, it's one of those that the committee, we've talked about this before. They're not going to look at a Big 12 schedule where you say, okay, you lost to Texas Tech. You lost to Cincinnati. Backup quarterback or not, unfortunately, they're not going to give that the time of day. We've seen time and time again, the Big 12 is not valued as much. Ever since BYU lost, they don't have that appeal there.
Yeah, and I think the big problem that, Arizona State people don't want to address, and again, I'm in agreement with you. I think the committee has ranked the Alabamas, the Ole Misses, honestly, fairly. I don't have a problem with 13. I think looking at their resume, more importantly, who's behind them, I very well could see where the committee says, hey, we might want to punch Bama further, but those teams like a Colorado, those teams, like a Iowa State, BYU, have missed their chance to leapfrog Alabama because they've blown it, right?
Exactly.
So if you're Arizona State and you're saying, hey, why aren't we ranked ahead of an Ole Miss Alabama right now? The problem is, Cade, as fun as Arizona State has been, Yes, you've got two losses. One of them, we know, you mentioned the backup. We get it. But even with that, they have not looked like a dominant team in pretty much any of their wins, with the exception of the Wyoming game to start the season.
Yeah, and
I
I
mean, they
mean,
barely got by Mississippi State, barely got by Texas State, lost to Tech, barely beat Kansas, Utah. I mean, there's no standout. Hey, we went and just dominated this game. Yes, you beat BYU. That's great. You beat Kansas State on the road. That's great. But there's no real defining, hey, we went out and kicked some butt. Alabama's got a couple of those performances. Yes, they've also got some bad. But I think if we took the pulse of everybody, you would say Bama playing their A game is better than Arizona State right now playing their A game.
yeah, and I mean, I've got Arizona State's schedule here to just look it up. And you mentioned you went through all the highlights I was about to go through. You look at it, and
Oh, sorry. Didn't mean
yeah,
to release
no,
one.
you're good. I was able to pull it up in time. You're good, but just you already mentioned it. When you're beating Mississippi State by 7, when it's Texas State on the road by 3, you lose in Lubbock. Yes, that is a difficult place to play. I understand that. We've been through that. Kansas only by 4, which, to be fair, that looks better and better every single week that you beat Kansas by 4.
Sure it does.
Utah, only an 8-point win at the time was the big deal, but Utah has not looked like themselves. They've continued to deteriorate further and further. Their biggest and best game, Tyler, was honestly the game you saw where they beat up Oklahoma State 42-21. That is the most I guess well-rounded we've seen Arizona State in terms of, them controlling a game no matter who they're playing. They had the opportunity to do that against BYU, and what I'm going to say sounds bad, but unfortunately I think this is how the committee is looking at it. You were up 21-0 in that game. That game should have been over at halftime, is what I would assume the mind of the committee is. When you have a team on the ropes like that at home, even though BYU's a good team, you should not be able to let them back up and have a shot at a Hail Mary with 1 second left. I would assume that would have to play at least a little bit of the factor. Now, the good news, if you're Arizona State, you beat Arizona. Easier said than done most years, but Arizona not a good team this year. You win that game, you're playing for the Big 12 title, you still get your spot anyway. I know some Arizona State fans have shown some concerns on social media tonight about, are they going to try to put Tulane over us? No. You beat Kansas State. Tulane lost to Kansas State. Tulane has the bad loss to Oklahoma, the 15-point loss all the way back in September. Arizona State, if they win the Big 12, they're getting in. Now, we could change that question to a different Big 12 team, and I could see Tulane getting in. But I think Arizona State would be fine in that scenario.
Yeah, I can't see them getting leapfrogged because for Tulane, especially with Army going down the way they did,
Yeah.
Tulane loses out on a big opportunity, right? And the fact that Kansas State loses and OU's turned out the way they've been, Tulane doesn't get a lot of extra credit, so to speak, in these last couple of weeks from the committee. The best they could hope for is Arizona State, Iowa State, BYU all kind of really slipping hard, right? Um, but for Arizona State, your resume is going to get you over a Tulane and you'll be fine. And you don't have to worry about those SEC teams in front of you, right? You're not going to get kicked out because of those SEC teams. You're going to be a conference champ as long as you take care of business and you're playing spoiler for those SEC teams. So that's what people seems I think this year with the expansion of the playoff are almost even more caught up, maybe too much, in how the committee kind of views these little what I would call ties. Right, the committee won't tell you this. They'll say, "Hey, we analyze 32 data points, blah blah blah." At the end of the day, when it's really close, Cade, they revert to what the eye test.
Yeah.
They should. I mean, they're human. They're not robots.
Exactly.
So when it comes to your gaggle of Bama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Arizona State, I would be willing to bet good money that the committee views those teams very similarly, and even Clemson maybe, right? So at 12 through 16, they probably actually view them a lot closer than you think by these rankings. But at the end of the day, it's those slight edges, right? So that's where the eye test comes into play. So if I'm Arizona State, you're sitting pretty. Go take care of business, take care of Arizona, and go win the Big 12, and there's nothing to worry about. That's the big thing I keep coming back to. If your fan base is like, man, we're on the edge, we're on the cut. First of all, and I think you can agree with this, Cade, most of the time there's not 12 legit championship contending teams as far as national title. most years in college football.
I
Can we
mean,
agree on that?
you could make the argument that in the 14 playoff, most years there was maybe 3 at best, and that fourth team was just kind of there. I mean, we went through it several times with Oklahoma playing
Yeah,
Alabama and LSU, Notre Dame playing
yeah.
Alabama, years where it was just, okay, someone's got to get beat up by the number 1 team in the country. We'll see how that 2-3 game plays out, though. But I think, am I glad for the 12-team playoffs? Of course I am. You've heard me
Oh,
rant.
absolutely.
You've
It's
heard me
great.
say I think it
Great.
should be 24. Go with what the FCS
Sure.
D2 and D3 do. But I think at the end of the day, I get where a lot of the frustration is from Arizona State fans. I absolutely get that. If I was in that position, I'd be angry too. That's what being a fan is all about. But I think at the end of the day, when you look at Alabama's schedule, you look at what have they done? They've beat Georgia. They beat South Carolina. Yes, they've lost at Vanderbilt. Yes, they've lost to Tennessee. They beat Missouri, which keep in mind, Missouri is still ranked. They're still in that considered a quality win as well. Beating LSU. LSU won this week. Even though a lot of people are down on LSU, I'm one of them. They're not that good of a team, but they're 7-4. They're going to be considered a good win. That's just unfortunately how this is going to work. Same thing when you look at Ole Miss and look at one of the stats, game control. How well do you play a game from start to finish? You look at what Ole Miss has been able to do. Yes, you could look at the schedule and say, well, it's Furman, it's Georgia Southern, it's Wake, it's Middle Tennessee. Are they really going to get credit for that? Yes. Not because they won, but because of how they won. Yes, the Kentucky loss is bad. Losing to LSU is not great. But beating South Carolina 27-3 on the road, beating Georgia the way they did 28-10, you can look at those losses and say, well, that outnumbers their 2 big wins. And I agree. I think that's a fair point. I think that's why Ole Miss, should a little bit of chaos happen, I might be having an entire different argument with you next week, Tyler. I might be presenting an entire different case on who I think should be in. But as of right now, as we stand on November 26th, that late at night here, nearly 10 o'clock Central, Ole Miss, Alabama, and even South Carolina, when we flip over to their schedule and look what they've done. Yes, they also lost to LSU. They lost to Ole Miss. They lost to Alabama. But what have they done? They've beaten Missouri. They've beaten Texas A&M. You want to count Vanderbilt as a nice win? They even did that on the road, 28-7. South Carolina will have one more opportunity if they get Clemson. If they beat them, that's really the key to this whole thing, I feel like. Because
Yeah.
if South Carolina loses that game, Clemson's got a good shot at getting in, and then it turns into Alabama and Ole Miss, and that becomes an even tighter conversation we would have. But if South Carolina wins that game, Tyler, oh boy, are things going to look absolutely chaotic when we get to the selection Sunday. Things will look absolutely crazy if South Carolina pulls that off.
Yeah, well, and I want to say this too. This is probably controversial. I think the committee so far, for the most part, has done a pretty good job this season. I haven't had very many complaints, especially when you look in the context of, hey, the committee knows there's big games coming up. So they're ranking these teams based on what's happened so far and not so much trying to look ahead, which is what I think is fair, right?
Right.
You can't try to say, hey, well, Alabama may have lost this week, but they've got an opportunity to win a big game, so we're still going to keep them up here. I think they've treated the SEC teams pretty much fairly. We're looking at right now, if the playoffs started right now, you're getting 3 SEC teams in
Yeah.
when there's people trying to push for 5.
Yeah, and I
think
think
3
that's
is fair. I would,
Yeah, it's fair.
yeah. I mean, now here's what I want to get to with you because you mentioned Miami. You're kind of question marking. Dude, let's talk about that. Why you question marking Miami at 6?
My question mark with Miami at 6 is more so I feel like Miami and SMU should be grouped together. You look at Miami's schedule. Yes, they have the
Okay.
Florida win. That's nice. You have Louisville. That's nice. You lost to Georgia Tech by 5. That is, not a great loss, but hey, Georgia Tech's a good team. They're 7-4. We'll see what they do against Georgia this week. Here's my problem, though. SMU, what have they done? They have the loss to BYU. They also beat Louisville. They have a decent win against Duke. They beat Pitt. Miami also has that Duke game as well, but the win over Pitt, and I think SMU has played a lot better when it turns into controlling games. Miami, how many times have you heard me talk about this, Tyler, where they just seem to find a way to win? You don't believe that they're going to lose, But then you look at the scoreboard and they're down 20 and they come back and win, or they're down double digits and find a way to win. I think that's more of an eye test thing, at least for me personally, that you look at. I think Miami and SMU, two one-loss teams grouped together. SMU has the better loss than Miami, and I think Georgia and Tennessee should both be above Miami. I think Georgia should be 6, Tennessee should be 7. You want to put Miami above SMU at 8 and 9. At that point, I think it really doesn't make a difference. I would put SMU above because of that quality loss, and I think SMU's looked a lot more complete at times.
And I think that's fair points. But I also want to give the committee another note of credit here because what do we say, Cade? We were talking about it kind of in the review, kind of, off the channel when we were watching Unfold Saturday. The committee could have put Georgia up in that 6th spot,
They
right?
could have.
Because they won. But they didn't because they looked at it and said, hey, Georgia kind of slopped around with UMass. They don't
did.
deserve to be in the top 6 to jump Miami. So I got to give them credit for that. I really do because I think in years past when you looked at the committee, they would have probably just kind of glanced over that, looked at the file, and said, all right, well, we'll slide Georgia up to 6. They did not do that. So I agree with your points about SMU, and I think we've touched on that kind of all season, especially in the last month or so. We felt that SMU is a better team. The good news is they've got a chance to prove that on the field, right? And I really think, depending on how that game goes, very easily you see whoever loses kind of kicked out. Should you get that matchup for the ACC title game?
Absolutely. And the one final note I want to address is Notre Dame, and this is not my opinion. We've shared our opinion about Notre Dame multiple times. You can go and watch our recap video where we basically said nothing because there's nothing to say about beating Army 49-14 other than, yeah, Notre Dame's a good football team. What do you want me to say about it? They're really good right now. And I think that's where this problem comes in. I've seen people complain about, well, Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois. Why are they not punished for losing to Northern Illinois? And I get that. If we looked at Notre Dame just at a point blank, that loss is horrible. It's going to continue. It's looked worse and worse and worse throughout the season. But I think you have to look at what they've done right before that. They beat Texas A&M. That holds a lot of weight right now. Now, if Texas beats Texas A&M drops to 8-4, that could look maybe a little different. We'll have to see how things play out. We can't jump on that yet. But you look at what Notre Dame's done. They have that win over Louisville. And then really after that is where things get interesting. Tyler, you look at Stanford, Georgia Tech, Navy, Florida State, Virginia, Army. And the thing that stands out to me is none of those games are close. Closest one's Georgia Tech, 31-13. That's an 18-point win, unless I forgot how to do math. No, that is an 18-point win. There's no game that's close. Every game is 3 possessions minimum. Notre Dame has not only been beating teams, they've been wailing on them. Every test that's been, all right, let's see how Notre Dame does this. Oh, they blew them out. Well, let's see how they do against Navy. Oh, they blew them out and forced a bunch of turnovers. Well, let's see how they do against Virginia. Okay, they beat them by 21. Let's see how Army handles them. And I was really excited to see how Army handled them, and they beat them by 35. If they do the same thing to USC, which I think will be their toughest test yet in terms of what USC can bring to the table, it's a rivalry game, all these other things going out to the Coliseum. I think Lincoln Riley will put a lot of emphasis on that game, trying to end the year strong. I wouldn't be shocked if Notre Dame wins that game by double digits, though. And if they continue to do that, why shouldn't Notre Dame be rewarded in the top 5? Keep in mind, they won't be number 5 in the playoff bracket because Oregon and Ohio State, Penn State, that'll all have to sort itself out some way. They won't be number 5 when it comes to that. They'll probably be 6 or somewhere around there. But they're still a really good team. That Northern Illinois loss is horrible, but when you look like a completely different team from the second week of the season to now, the committee's going to put some rank into that.
Yeah, again, they're human, right?
Exactly.
When you're able to bounce back an absolute, what could be a program-breaking loss. I mean, that's how bad that loss was, right? You get the big one over A&M, you turn around and you just lay an absolute egg of all eggs. And like you mentioned, it's not like NIU has turned around and been the MAC champion. No, they're struggling to be in the middle of the pack in the MAC.
Yeah, so they're 6-5.
Yeah, it's not a good loss, but again, the human element committee says, okay, you go look at their body of work. Yeah, that loss is bad. They've got the great win the week before, and they've responded much better than an Alabama, a Tennessee, at times, so you got to give them that credit. And things have led that way. And people go, well, Notre Dame can't just skate by and play in and not play in a conference and get rewarded. They can't get a bye. They are they are restricted from being able to get a first round bye. That's not possible for them. That's reserved for conference champions only. So theoretically, I think they're getting punched enough just to say, hey, we could go 12-0 and I get a bye,
Yeah,
right?
and I think
So
the
I
other
think that's fair.
yeah, and I think the other thing about that, you mentioned the punishment part, and I think I would even say even further the fact that most years they're not even going to get that, magical 5 seed that everyone seems to want. I think most years there's going to be a scenario like this where there are a lot of good SEC or Big Ten teams at the top, that one of them is going to get that spot over Notre Dame, I would argue.
Yeah,
Most years I think will be
yeah,
similar to that, where the best thing for Notre Dame is, oh, they're number 6 or number 7. Yeah, they're at home. They're hosting a first round game. Good luck against whoever they play, though, because they're going to be in for a tough game more than likely.
yeah.
But I do want to end this, though, looking at the 12-team bracket as it stands right now. Your first round games, the 5-12, Arizona State would be going to Ohio State. Tennessee and Georgia, if the season were to end right now, they would play. I don't think we're going to get these SEC versus SEC and Big Ten versus Big Ten first rounds. I really kind of hope that doesn't happen. I'd like to see a little bit more mixing and matching there. That's just my personal preference, though. And again, that's more the human element coming in than anything else. Indiana, Penn State would be your 11-6. Notre Dame, SMU would be your 7-10. That would be a fun game, I think. SMU going up to South Bend. I think that would probably be maybe the most exciting of those four, Tyler.
I also think the Penn State Indiana would be right there with it, just because those two teams, wouldn't clash in the regular season, right? So you get kind of an answer to say, okay, well, we saw what each of them did get us, excuse me, against Ohio State, but who's really the better team?
Absolutely. And then you look at, the four buys, Boise State at 4, Miami 3, Texas 2, and Oregon 1. If you're wondering, well, SMU's undefeated in conference play and Miami isn't, why aren't they in that buy spot? We're just going by highest ranked team until now. That's what ESPN said. That's what the committee said. Nothing you could do about that, unfortunately. But oh well.
Yeah.
Again, that's another thing that will change as the season progresses once we get to conference championship games and all that fun stuff. But Tyler, unless you've got any other final thoughts here, I think it's about time to wrap this one up.
Yeah, it is. I think we fleshed it out pretty well. The controversial take of the week, I think the committee did a good job biting me. That's what I'll end it on.
There you go. But folks, as always, feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell to always be notified when new videos come out, and leave a comment down below. Again, what do you think the committee got right? What did they get wrong? What do you agree with us on or disagree with us on? Still sitting at 93 subscribers, still trying to get to that triple digits, hit 100 before the end of the year. It wouldn't seem like a lot. 100 of anything, that can vary a lot. 100 subscribers, not a lot on YouTube, but it really would mean a lot to us. So, folks, as always, until next time, have a good one, everybody.